Perspective is the lens through which you tell your story. Which lens you choose affects your reader's experience and their opinion of your characters. So today I want to talk about perspective in creative writing. Who is telling your story? As the author, you bring your own unique worldview to your story. So do your readers. However, it is your choice in main character and distance that have the greatest effect on the perspective of your story. This is Ignited Ink Writing, a channel dedicated to helping authors like you transform your writing so it lingers with your readers. Because writing that lingers gets remembered and recommended to others. I'm Caitlin Burvey, editor and writer. Let's start with your author and reader lenses. Your personal beliefs, likes, and knowledge will seep into your writing. This is not a bad thing. This can add a lot. It can add depth and knowledge and experience. For example, I used to want to be a doctor, so I studied medicine. I worked as a clinical allergy specialist. And a lot of my characters end up being healers. What this means is I'm able to use that knowledge of medicine, of anatomy and physiology, to add more depth to my story, to make this healing real. Kevin Hearn also uses his passions to fuel and deepen his writing. He loved Celtic mythology before he wrote his best-selling series, The Iron Druid Chronicles. His series benefited from that passion, from that lens he used. However, not all of your preferences are going to benefit your story. Sometimes we fall into patterns and we unintentionally only write about specific types of people. This doesn't mean the big political types of people. I'm not saying that you're only writing one race or anything like that. Sometimes, though, all of our protagonists end up being our age. Or all of our characters are from a similar town. While this can be great if you're writing a series, it might not be what you intended. So take a moment as an author and think about what types of characters you tend to write about and what situations they tend to be in. Then challenge yourself to step outside that box. Write a short piece, whether it's a scene or a short story, from an entirely different character's perspective. If you tend to write YA, write from the perspective of someone in a nursing home. If you tend to write a very specific subgenre, step outside that box. Write a romance if you write science fiction, just to spruce up your writing skills and to try something different. If you're writing very specific stories like that, it can be difficult to continue improving as an author. So pull from other genres, pull techniques from other areas of writing to keep your skills up and to make your stories more interesting. Along with your authorial lens, readers are going to bring their own lens to your story, their own perspective, life experiences, that sort of a thing. And you have no control over this. So generally, don't worry about it if someone reads some weird thing into your story that you didn't intend. If they're an outlier, that's just them bringing their own lens to your story. But if you're getting feedback from a lot of people saying that they're reading something that you didn't intend, take a look at your story to see why they're reading that and how you can change that if you want to, or how you can bring that out more if you actually like it. Just be aware that readers are going to bring their own lens and it's not really in your control. Next, let's talk about something that is in your control. Your protagonist lens. Who your main character is determines who your readers root for and what type of story you're writing. Kristen Terrell's novel, Here Lies Daniel Tate, is told from the point of view of a con man. This means that readers are rooting for this guy to win, to escape the police, to get what he wants. In real life, we would never root for the con man. We would want him to get caught, to get justice for the people that he harmed. But this is a story and it's told through his lens, so we're rooting for him. The flip side is also true. Who you choose to be your main character determines who your readers root against. The person or force directly opposing your protagonist is your antagonist and is the person your readers are going to hope doesn't succeed. Be aware of that when you're writing. This doesn't always have to be a person. It could be an organization. It could be a force, like a tornado, a force of nature. It could be a higher power. Or it could even be the main character themselves if this is an internal conflict type of a story. Just know that who your main character is going to determine who's the villain in your reader's eyes. That main character is also going to determine what type of emotional journey your reader experiences. Think of any modern superhero story. Right now, that is a comedy because the heroes usually win. Comedy in the traditional Greek sense where it's a successful story, a story of triumph. If you were to flip that and tell it from the villain's point of view instead of the hero's, that now becomes a tragedy, and it's a very different emotional journey for the viewer or the reader. The same is true of any genre. Think of horror. If you were to write from the point of view of the monster or killer, that's no longer horror. That's now science fiction, a dark fantasy, or even literary fiction. Sometimes it can be fun to try writing a scene from the point of view of your villain to get a better sense for them and to better understand what they want out of your story. So be aware how the lens of your protagonist is going to affect your reader's opinions. Another aspect of that lens is point of view. So next I want to talk about your point of view lens. After you select your protagonist, you have to choose a point of view. This is another type of lens. In first person, we're seeing everything through the character's eyes. It's like we're wearing those character's eyes as glasses. In third person or omniscient, we're not seeing it through the character's eyes. It's more like the author's eyes in a way. When you choose first person and third person close, your readers get to see a lot of your character's internal thoughts and feelings. If you're writing a story that's about internal conflict and change, this can add to the story and it can show the reader that change. If you're writing a story that's all about external conflict, these might not be the best points of view. When your character's inner life doesn't matter as much, and it's more about external conflict and relationships with other people, you might want to use something like omniscient or a more distant third person, so you can focus more on those events and less on the character's internal thoughts and feelings. These different types of point of view also affect how close your reader feels to your character. In first person and third person close, they're really close because they're seeing your character's thoughts and feelings in real time. In third person distant or omniscient, they don't get as many thoughts and feelings, so they don't feel as close. They're not inside their head as much. That can be a detriment, but not always. Sometimes your character would be really annoying if your reader was in their head all of the time. It also depends on the type of story you're telling. If you want your characters to be able to keep secrets from your reader, to know things that they don't, then first person is not going to work because your reader is always in their head. They know what they're thinking all of the time. So if you want that character to be able to keep secrets, third person or omniscient is a better choice. Same thing if you want your reader to know more than any one character. Your reader is only viewing the story through that character's eyes if you're using first person. They can't know anything that character doesn't. So if you want them to know more, you either need to switch points of view or choose something other than first person. Using multiple points of view gives you different lenses to show your reader, different perspectives. So your reader gets a bigger perspective of the story than any one character. In Neil Shusterman's Scythe, we get the point of view of two teenagers, one a boy, one a girl, who start out in a very similar path in the story and then are split. And they show us two different sides of this futuristic society. And if we didn't have both their perspectives, the reader would lose out on a lot of what's happening in this world. So both of those lenses are necessary for the reader experience. That's how point of view can impact your reader's opinions and understanding of your story. Another important thing to think about when it comes to your main character is the conflict. So next, let's talk about your conflict lens. Your choice in main character affects how your reader perceives the events of your story. If your main character is just the person who witnesses a car crash, that car crash is not as emotionally impactful as if the main character is the person experiencing the car crash. More often than not, You want your main character to be the person who is the most affected by the events of your story, because they're the character who's going to experience the greatest change, the greatest character arc. Also, these events matter to them more than they might matter to someone else. Your reader wants to feel that change and the emotions of these events. However, occasionally you might use the perspective of someone because it's the most interesting, not necessarily because they're the person experiencing the events. An example of this is The Book Thief by Marcus Zuckick. This novel is narrated by Death. That is an interesting perspective. Death has thoughts and feelings that a person just wouldn't about the events, the characters, and their lives. However, the main character, the protagonist, is Liesel, a young girl. We also get her thoughts and feelings. So even though this is not a multiple point of view novel, we do still get two characters' perspectives, two lenses. That's an example of a time when the conflict is not something that the narrating character is directly experiencing, but it is still real to the reader because they're experiencing it through Liesel. So be aware how when you choose your main character, you're also choosing how your reader is going to experience the conflict and events of your story. I want to leave you with why an editor suggests thinking about your perspective. Once you understand perspective, you can use it to your advantage. Often as writers, we just start writing when we get an idea. And while that's a great approach to get started, there comes a time when you should pause before continuing on to think about the perspective. Ask yourself, is this the best character to tell this story? What type of story am I trying to tell? What lenses am I using? And make sure that they are the best for your story and they're going to show what you want them to show. If you write the whole thing to the end without pausing to think about perspective, then you might have a total rewrite on your hands when you realize you used the wrong perspective. So if you just pause, ask yourself these questions before writing the next scene, then you will avoid a lot of work later on. What's your favorite perspective to read or write? Share it in the comments below. And for more videos on perspective, point of view, and other aspects of writing, subscribe to Ignited Ink Writing, a channel dedicated to helping authors like you transform your writing so it lingers with your readers. Because writing that lingers gets remembered and recommended to others. I'm Caitlin Burvey, editor and writer. To find out more about me, go to www.ignitedinkwriting.com. There you will also find a chart comparing the different points of view, which you can use to determine what the best perspective for your story is. And now it's your turn to use the various lenses of your story to craft your ideal perspective and ignite your ink.